You ever have one of those moments where time slows down just enough for you to realize how bad you're about to fuck up, but not enough to actually stop it? That was me, 15 minutes before work, biking through the neighborhood like a maniac because I was late. Again, I'd skipped breakfast, my shirt was already sticking to my back, and I was texting with one hand like a true genius. Something stupid about a client call moving up. I wasn't looking, I wasn't thinking, and then bam! I hit someone. Full-on body-to-body collision. The front tire of my bike clipped his shin, and before I could even register what was happening, I was flying over the handlebars, arms flailing like a cartoon character. I landed hard, palms first, then elbow, then hip. The world tilted sideways for a second. Shit, I groaned, rolling onto my back. I expected yelling, cursing, a fist, maybe. Instead, a voice, surprisingly calm, said, "Dude, are you okay?" I cracked an eye open. Standing above me was a guy, my age, maybe a little older, tall, thick arms, scruffy jaw, hair that looked like it never listened to him. He was holding a reusable grocery bag that had spilled half its contents onto the pavement: bananas, a six-pack of seltzer, and a box of granola bars. His shin was already starting to turn red. "Oh my God," I sat up fast. "I am so sorry, I wasn't looking. Are you okay?" "I mean," he said, glancing at his leg, "I've had worse. Rugby in high school was way more violent. You good?" I checked my arms. My palms were scraped raw, my elbow was bleeding through my shirt, and my leg throbbed from the impact. "Yeah, just bruised ego and road rash." "You sure?" He crouched down beside me. Up close, his eyes were hazel and weirdly soft. "That elbow looks nasty. Thanks. That's what I was going for." He gave a quiet laugh, then stood and offered his hand. "Come on, let me help." I took it. His grip was warm, firm. He pulled me to my feet like I weighed nothing. "You got somewhere to be?" he asked, glancing at the scattered groceries. "Yeah, work," I said, "but I think I'm gonna be late." He studied me for a second, really looked at me, and then did the weirdest thing. "You should clean that up before it gets worse. I live just around the corner. You want to come wash up?" I blinked. "Wait, seriously? You just crashed into me, and now you're bleeding all over the sidewalk. I figure the least I can do is offer you a shower." "Most people would have sued me." He grinned. "I'm not most people." His apartment was on the second floor of a brownstone. He let us in with a key he pulled from his pocket without breaking stride, like this was something he did all the time: rescue dumbasses off the street. I followed him inside, still mildly in shock. The place was cozy. Exposed brick, ferns hanging near the windows, a couch that looked too nice for a single guy's apartment. He tossed the grocery bag on the kitchen island and gestured toward the hallway. "Bathroom's the first door on the left. Towels are under the sink. I'll grab the first aid kit." I hesitated. "You sure about this? I don't want to, bleed on your tile." "I've had worse on those tiles." I paused. "Do I want to know?" He smirked. "Probably not." I stepped into the bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror for a second. My shirt was sweat-soaked and torn at the elbow. My skin looked like I had been dragged behind the bike instead of riding it. But the weirdest part? I couldn't stop smiling. What the hell was happening? I stripped off my ruined shirt and stepped into the shower before I could overthink it. The bathroom was clean, cleaner than mine anyway, and smelled faintly like eucalyptus. He had one of those rainfall shower heads that made you feel like you were under a waterfall, and the second the water hit my skin, I let out an involuntary groan. God, that felt good. I didn't realize how scraped up I really was until the water hit the cuts. It stung like hell, but in a satisfying way, like pain that served a purpose. I lathered up, trying to keep the suds away from the worst of the raw skin, and tried to mentally unpack what the hell had just happened. This guy, I still didn't know his name, had invited me, a total stranger, into his home after I literally crashed into him. Not only was he not pissed, he offered me a shower, Who does that? When I stepped out, I wrapped a towel around my waist and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My hair was dripping, my face was flushed, and I looked weirdly better than I had in days. Go figure. Trauma looks good on me. There was a knock at the door. "You decent?" he called. Define decent. He pushed it open with one hand, holding a t-shirt and a pair of basketball shorts. "These might be big on you, but they're clean. Better than your ripped shirt." I took them, trying not to notice the way his eyes skimmed over me for half a second too long before flicking away. "Thanks," I said, drying off a little more before tugging the shirt over my head. It smelled like detergent and something else, something warm and familiar. Cedarwood, maybe. It was loose around the collar and soft, like it had been washed 100 times. When I walked out, he was back in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of water. "I figured hydration was in order," he said, handing one to me. "You looked like you were seconds from passing out back there." "Honestly, you're not wrong." He nodded to the couch. "Sit. Let me look at your arm. You a doctor or something?" "Nope," he said, grabbing the first aid kit from a drawer. "But I grew up with 3 younger siblings. I've patched up more dumb injuries than I can count." I sat down, trying not to wince as he knelt in front of me, gently lifting my arm. He worked silently for a moment, dabbing the cut with antiseptic. His hands were careful but steady, warm, confident. I stared at the top of his head, the way his hair curled slightly at the ends, wondering what his deal was, why he wasn't weirded out by any of this. "There," he said, smoothing a bandage over the wound. "You'll live." "Thanks, nurse." "Oh, right." He leaned back on his heels, wiping his hands on a towel. "Ethan." "Ty." We shook hands, finally, like this was a normal interaction, like we hadn't already seen each other half naked. "Sorry I hit you, Ethan." He grinned. "Honestly, that might have been the best thing that's happened to me all week." We sat in the kitchen again, just like we had a few days before, and talked. He told me he worked as a freelance videographer, mostly small gigs, promo content for indie brands, weddings when rent was tight. He'd lived in the building for 3 years. Was a dog person without a dog. Used to box in college. Didn't eat fruit unless it was in smoothie form. I told him I was a graphic designer. That I hated my job most days. That I'd almost moved out of the city twice but chickened out both times. That I couldn't cook to save my life, and once caught a microwave burrito on fire. It was easy. Too easy. At some point, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me with this half smile, like he was debating something. "What?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just thinking how weird this is." "Which part?" "All of it. You crash into me, I bring you home, you're in my shower 20 minutes later. And now we're here. Talking like this isn't the weirdest meet cute in the world." I laughed. "Meet cute, huh?" He shrugged again. "I mean, technically." There was a pause. One of those lingering, loaded silences. The kind that stretches just a little too long to be accidental. I looked at him, really looked, and saw it. The shift in his posture, the flicker of curiosity in his expression, the tension that wasn't there earlier. Something was happening. He cleared his throat, looked away. "Anyway, you should probably get going before you end up moving in." "You say that like it's not already tempting." He smirked. "Don't test me." I didn't leave right away. I meant to, sure. I even stood up, said thanks again, gave the whole I should probably head out line like a normal person with boundaries. But then Ethan offered me lunch. "Just grilled cheese," he said. "And by that, I mean I'm gonna burn one side of the bread and pretend it's gourmet." That's how I found myself sitting barefoot at his kitchen counter, still wearing his clothes, while he hovered over the stove like a man preparing to go to culinary war with a pan. I watched him, amused. "You do this with all the guys you run into on the street?" He glanced back with a grin. "Only the ones who nearly kill me." The sandwich was, in fact, slightly burnt on one side, but it was also warm and buttery and, paired with a can of root beer, weirdly perfect. Maybe it was the adrenaline crash, or the fact that my elbow was still sore, or the fact that Ethan had this calm, grounded energy that made everything feel 10 degrees easier. But I felt relaxed for the first time in days. "You live alone?" I asked, finishing the last bite. "Yeah," he said, rinsing off the pan. "Used to have a roommate, but he moved out when his girlfriend got pregnant. I got lucky with the rent here. Grandfathered in." Sounds fake. "Oh, totally. I'm probably one landlord heart attack away from being evicted." I chuckled, leaning back against the counter, feeling full and sleepy, and way too comfortable for someone who is technically still a stranger in this guy's home. "You want to crash for a bit?" Ethan asked, not looking at me. "You look like you haven't slept in a week." "I'm good," I said, but I wasn't. I'd barely slept the night before. I'd been running on caffeine and chaos. I must have looked like hell. Ethan finally looked up. "Seriously, it's no big deal. Couch is yours. Or bed, if you promise not to drool." I blinked. "That was a joke, right?" He smirked. "Mostly." We ended up on the couch. Him at one end, me at the other, legs stretched out, shoulders just close enough to brush when we leaned back. We watched some dumb cooking competition show. I don't even remember what was happening on the screen, just that Ethan kept making sarcastic commentary under his breath that had me snorting with laughter. He had this dry delivery that made even the dumbest jokes land. "This guy just poured vodka into a cake batter," he said at one point, eyebrows raised. "Respect. I'd eat that." "You'd eat anything." "I'm wearing your clothes and eating your food. You should probably be worried." He laughed, and I felt it in my chest. That warmth again. That weird sense of connection. It didn't make sense. We'd just met. This kind of ease wasn't normal. But there it was, unfolding between us like it had always been there. Eventually, the show faded into background noise, and the conversation drifted into quieter territory. Family, shitty bosses, his first heartbreak, my worst roommate. "You ever date guys?" I asked, keeping my tone light, casual. He didn't look surprised. "Yeah," he said. "A few. Nothing serious. Why?" I shrugged. "Just curious." "You?" "Same," I said. "Well, minus the actual dating part. Mostly just messy situations." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. "This doesn't feel messy, though." I turned to look at him. He was watching me. There was that silence again. Not uncomfortable. Just charged. He looked down, then back up. "Okay, so maybe this is a little weird to say, but do you want to hang out again?" I blinked. "Like, not in a near-death kind of way?" "Yeah. Like, on purpose. Like, grab a drink or something." "Was it a date?" "It wasn't not a date." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I'd like that." He smiled. Small but real. "Cool." Then he stood and stretched, his shirt lifting just enough for me to catch a glimpse of the defined line of his abs before he pulled it back down. "All right," he said. "Now get out before I get clingy." We agreed to meet up that Friday. Ethan texted me midweek. Nothing dramatic, just a "still good for Friday?" followed by a sunglasses emoji that felt way more confident than I did. I replied with, "Yeah, definitely," and spent the next 2 days rotating through 4 different shirts before deciding on the least wrinkled one. I told myself it wasn't a date. It wasn't a thing. It was just 2 guys getting a drink. But if it wasn't a date, why was I so nervous? We met at this low-key bar tucked behind a bookstore, his suggestion. It had exposed brick walls, vinyl booths, dim lighting, and an actual working jukebox that hadn't been updated since 2003. Ethan was already there when I walked in, leaning against the bar with a whiskey in hand, looking every bit like the kind of guy who knew how to flirt without trying. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey, you're not bleeding this time." "Not yet," I said. "Night's young." He laughed and gestured toward the bartender. "Your poison? Beer? Whatever's on tap and not trying to kill me." We slid into a booth near the back, close enough to hear the music, far enough not to be drowned out by it. The booth was small, and our knees bumped under the table. Neither of us moved them. "So," he said, nursing his drink, "are you always this clumsy? Or was I just lucky that day?" "Oh, I'm a total menace," I said. "You were just the first to catch the full impact." "Guess I should feel honored." We talked. Again. Like before. Effortlessly. About everything and nothing. I learned he used to be pre-med before switching to video work. I told him I once tried to become a tattoo artist and gave up after nearly passing out during an apprenticeship. He showed me a scar on his shoulder from a skateboarding accident in high school. I showed him the small, faded mistake tattoo on my ankle I got during a blackout weekend in Austin. We drank, laughed, our knees still touching. At one point, the topic drifted to dating again. He asked, "So, any recent train wrecks?" I shook my head. "I'm in a drought, self-imposed. Less heartbreak, more peace." Ethan nodded like he understood. "Yeah, been there." He didn't say more, but something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something behind the eyes. Pain? Regret? I didn't pry. Instead, I asked something stupid, just to lighten the mood. "All right," I said, leaning in a little. "Tell me the worst date you've ever been on." His lips twitched into a grin. Easy. Guy made me watch The Notebook in his apartment while his roommate was visibly jerking off behind a half-open door. I choked on my beer. "What?" "Swear to God, I walked out halfway through the movie. I never even saw the ending. You miss nothing, they die." "Okay, spoiler. I'm doing you a favor." We were both laughing, but then the laughter faded, and the silence that followed felt thick again, like it was building up to something neither of us was quite ready to say. Ethan leaned in a little. His arm rested on the back of the booth behind me. He was close enough that I could smell whatever cologne he'd thrown on, something woodsy and clean and dangerous. "Can I ask you something?" he said, voice quieter now. "Yeah, that first day when I offered you the shower, did you think I was hitting on you?" I paused. "Yes," I said honestly. He nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure if I was." "That's oddly honest." "I didn't expect you to say yes." "I didn't expect to say yes," I admitted. He was looking at me now in that way again, like he was seeing something, measuring it. And then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in. I didn't move, but just before his lips touched mine, he pulled back, barely an inch. "Sorry," he said. "Too fast?" I shook my head. "No, I just didn't think it'd happen like this." He chuckled softly. "What, in a bar booth while Mr. Brightside plays in the background?" I glanced around. "Honestly, that's kind of poetic." We didn't kiss. Not yet, but it was there now. Between us. Not unsaid anymore. We walked home in silence, but not the awkward kind, the good kind. The kind filled with that slow, stretching energy that makes the air feel heavier. I could still feel the heat of Ethan's body from when he leaned in. My skin was buzzing. When we got to his block, I hesitated. "I can head home from here," I said, though I didn't really want to. "You could," he said, stopping in front of his building. "Or," I looked at him. "Or," he repeated, "you could come up and tell me why you didn't kiss me back." I exhaled through a laugh, shaking my head. "I did not kiss you back. You stopped." "Fair point," he said, already unlocking the door. "Let's discuss it over water." "Or whiskey. Whatever helps you tell the truth faster." I followed him upstairs. Inside, the lights were dim, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the fridge. Ethan tossed his keys on the counter and pulled 2 glasses from the cabinet. He poured whiskey without asking, slid one toward me. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," but my heart was pounding. He leaned on the counter, arms crossed, looking at me in that calm, steady way of his. "So, what held you back?" "I don't know," I said. It just felt like a big moment. And I didn't want to screw it up. Ethan smiled, that slow, crooked smile that messed with my stomach every time. "I'm not looking for perfect," he said. "Just real." That did something to me. Something I didn't expect. I set the glass down and stepped closer, the counter no longer between us. Okay, I said quietly. Real. And then I kissed him. No hesitation this time. No leaning halfway in and chickening out. I kissed him, fully, like I meant it. Like I'd been waiting for this since the second my bike hit him. He kissed me back immediately, hands settling on my waist, pulling me in. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't fumbling. It was honest, slow, like we both knew we had time now. We pulled apart, just barely, foreheads touching. See, he whispered, not so bad. Not bad at all. He kissed me again, softer this time, before taking my hand and pulling me gently toward the couch. We didn't jump each other. We didn't strip off clothes or rush anything. We just sat together, his arm around my shoulder, my hand resting on his leg, the air warm with something quiet and electric. At one point he turned and said, "You know, I wasn't looking for anything." "Me neither. But this," he said, squeezing my hand, "feels like something." I nodded. "Yeah, it really does." And there it was. The first real thing. I woke up to the smell of coffee and the faint sound of Ethan humming something vaguely indie and off-key. His apartment was filled with morning light, slanting through the blinds in soft, lazy beams. I blinked, stretched, and sat up on the couch. We hadn't slept in the same bed, not because I didn't want to, but because it had been late, and he'd fallen asleep with his arm draped over my shoulders, and I drifted off right there beside him, fully clothed, warm under the weight of his hoodie. It had been easy, safer than it should have felt. "Morning killer," he said, appearing from the kitchen with 2 mugs. "Still milking the fact that I hit you?" "Absolutely," he said, handing me one. "This scar on my shin is my new personality." I rolled my eyes but took the coffee. It was good, strong, not too bitter. We sat there for a while, sipping in silence. The kind of silence that said we didn't need to fill it with anything performative. No fake casual, it was just us. Whatever we were now. "I don't usually do this," I said, eventually. "Crash into guys and move into their living rooms?" "Exactly," I said, smiling. "But seriously, being here, it's not normal for me." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, same. Most people don't stick around past the first drink." "I guess I'm not most people." He looked over at me, eyes soft. "No, you're not." We decided to go out for bagels, which would have been uneventful if not for the fact that on the way back, we ran into Ethan's ex. Of course, she was walking her dog. One of those fluffy, white purse-sized breeds that always looked vaguely like they hated everyone. She saw us halfway down the block and changed course, headed right for us. "Ethan," she said, too cheerfully. He tensed beside me but smiled politely. "Hey, Claire." She glanced at me, then at our hands. We hadn't noticed we were holding them until she raised a perfect eyebrow. "This your new boyfriend?" she asked. Ethan cleared his throat. This is Ty." I offered a small nod. "Nice to meet you." She smiled tightly, then looked back at Ethan. "You always move this fast?" Ouch. Before he could respond, I stepped in, calm, steady. "We actually met when I hit him with my bike. So, technically it was a crash course." She blinked, thrown off. Ethan bit back a laugh. Claire muttered something about being late for a vet appointment and walked off, heels clicking aggressively against the pavement. Once she was out of earshot, Ethan let out a slow breath. That was something. "She seems fun." "Oh, she's a delight," he said dryly. "Thanks for stepping in." "No problem. I've got you covered. Literally and metaphorically." He looked over at me, a little surprised. "You're good at that. Knowing when to deflect, when to lighten things." "I've had practice," I said. "Let's just say I've been the weird third wheel in a lot of X-based drama." He stopped walking for a second, studying me. "You're kind of amazing, you know that?" I shrugged, heart pounding. "I'm just a guy who nearly turned you into a street pancake." "Yeah," he said. "And somehow, that still feels like the luckiest thing that's happened to me all year." The thing about things going too well is that you start waiting for the glitch. And yeah, I was waiting for it, quietly. In the back of my head, that tiny voice whispering, "This is too easy, too smooth, something's gonna fuck it up." Turns out, it wasn't wrong. It started small. Ethan got a last-minute gig, filming a corporate event for some fintech company with more money than sense. It meant late nights, tight deadlines, and a stressed-out Ethan with his laptop basically glued to his thigh. We still hung out, but the vibe shifted. No long conversations on the couch, no lazy breakfast, just texts like, "Sorry, slammed today. Tomorrow?" And I got it, I did. I had my own chaos with work, and I wasn't the clingy type. But I'd gotten used to seeing him, to this thing we were doing. And when someone goes from texting "good morning" to radio silence until 11 p.m., you start to feel it. The call happened a week later. I was walking home, earbuds in, when my phone lit up. "Ethan." "Hey," I answered, heart skipping a beat. There was a long pause. "Hey," he said. "You home?" "Yeah. Just heading in now." "What's up?" Another pause. Then, "Mind if I come by?" He showed up 20 minutes later, hoodie pulled over his head, hands in his pockets. He looked off, like he hadn't slept, like something had been chewing at him. I let him in. "You okay?" He sat down on the edge of my bed, elbows on his knees. "Yeah. No. I don't know." I waited. He looked up, finally. "You ever feel like you're scared to enjoy something because the second you do, it'll disappear?" I sat beside him, close but not touching. "All the time. I've had things fall apart before," he said. I didn't expect to meet someone like you, and it's messing with my head." My chest tightened. "Ethan," I said, "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready for. I just like being around you. That's it. No pressure, no plans, just this." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. I needed to hear that. "You don't always have to be the one holding it together," I said. "You can fall apart here. I won't run." He leaned his shoulder against mine, finally letting out a breath that sounded like it had been held for days. Later that night, we sat out on my fire escape with beers in hand, watching the city pulse below us. The hum of traffic, the flicker of lights, the low rumble of life. Ethan turned to me. "You know what's wild?" "What?" "If you hadn't hit me, we wouldn't be here right now." "Yeah," I said, "and you wouldn't have that scar on your leg. Worth it." He leaned in, kissed me. This time with no hesitation, no doubt, no half-second delay. Just warmth and clarity. And for the first time since this started, I didn't feel like something was about to fall apart. The weeks after that night didn't go perfectly. There were still late gigs, still missed texts and rescheduled plans. But the difference was, now we talked about it. Ethan started showing up with takeout when he worked late, dropping it off even if he couldn't stay. I started leaving him stupid voice notes when I passed by places that reminded me of that first day. Usually with something like, "Don't get hit by any more bikes. I'm still using your shorts." Some days we were tired and quiet. Some nights we were tangled up on my couch, half watching old movies and stealing lazy kisses between lines of dialogue. It wasn't always fireworks, but it was real. One Sunday, we ended up in the park with his camera. He was filming for a side project, and I was just tagging along, holding his lens bag and trying not to trip over squirrels. "You always this bossy?" I asked as he adjusted the tripod. "Only when I'm being brilliant," he replied without looking up. "You mean annoying?" Same thing. Later, while he filmed a wide shot of the lake, I asked, "Why do you keep doing this?" He turned. "Filming?" "No," I said, waving between us. "This. Us. Why are you still here?" He looked at me like it wasn't even a question. "Because When I met you, I was fine. Not great, just getting by. And then you slammed into me, and suddenly it felt like something shifted. Like, maybe getting hit that day knocked me into something better. I blinked. That's either the most romantic thing I've ever heard, or a concussion talking. He stepped closer. You're the first thing in a long time that doesn't feel temporary. That hit different. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Same. Months passed. We didn't become a social media couple or rush into moving in. We still had our separate lives. But he kept a toothbrush at my place. I kept a hoodie at his. We took turns making each other late for work. He filmed my hands once while I was sketching for a client and used it in one of his edits, saying it made the whole thing feel human. I never told him, but I watched that clip like 100 times. And every time someone asked how we met, he'd grin and say, he hit me with his bike. Which is technically true, but it doesn't tell you about the rest. The fire escape beers, the first kiss that didn't happen, the real one that did. The bagels, the quiet way he leaned against me when he didn't have the words, the way I stopped looking for the glitch. Because eventually, I realized this wasn't a glitch. It was the start of something. Something unexpected. Something real.